Okay. So would you please say and spell your name for me?
My name is Nettie Smith, Nettie, Smith, Smith.
Okay. And just as a start, would you give me just the brief kind of thumbnail sketch of your life? Who you are, where you're from, where you grew up, what you do?
Sure. So I'm 26. Yikes. That seems old because I don't feel 26. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. I went to school in Boston and then moved back to Colorado afterwards. And I did research up at the University of Colorado for a couple years, and then I joined Teach for America and decided to be a teacher. And so I'm in my second year teaching at an inner city school in Denver.
Okay. What kind of research were you doing?
It was research with adolescents on probation, and it was identifying their attitudes, behaviors, and I guess ideas about drug use and sexual activity because they're at the highest risk for contracting HIV and AIDS in our country.
So what did that work consist of?
I would go down to the probation office a couple times a week. The participants would take surveys on computers. They'd earn $50 for taking them. We'd follow them for 2 years, so I'd go to like juvenile halls and detention centers to follow up with them. And a lot of interaction with the participants, tracking them down over the 2 years, phone calls, consents, the HRC, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Was it as interesting as it sounds?
It was. A lot of it was leaving messages, phone calls, trying to reach people, track them down because phone numbers change like every 2 weeks. So some of that was kind of repetitive, but finding the participants and seeing them, I worked there for like 2 years. So kind of seeing them and following them and see where they end up for the 2 years was pretty interesting because some of the kids would totally pull it together. And then some kids were in detention centers for years. So,
How did you get into that work?
one of my friends worked there, and so I started off volunteering for 8 months, and then a job opened, so then I did it professionally.
Okay. And was it working with that population I guess, where did the idea of doing Teach for America come from? Was it a longer range interest, or was it working with those kids?
It was kind of both, I guess. Working with those kids, I decided that I didn't want to go back to school right away, and research wasn't for me. I didn't want to be writing papers constantly, but I really liked interacting with the participants, and I thought that although the research aspects of the project was great, implementation would be better, actually, instead of collecting the data, affecting these participants more. And so that kind of got me thinking, and I've always loved kids, and so I decided that I wanted to try being a teacher. So I looked into a couple different routes, and the easiest way for me to become a teacher and certified was Teach for America. So I applied and got in and didn't even realize how difficult that was, but it was easier than other routes. So
Okay. And then, so once you finish Teach for America, how much say do you have about either staying where you want to be or moving on to someplace else? Or...
So I'll be fully certified, and I'm hired by the district, and as long as my principal wants to renew my contract, which he's already said that he would like to, so I have the choice to stay at my school if I want to, but I'm also going to be a fully licensed teacher at the end of June, so if I want to go anywhere else, I could, but I really like my school.
Okay, we'll talk more about that in a second, but first, when you were in Boston studying, is this a direction that would have occurred to you back then? Okay, what did you think you were preparing yourself for
I
then?
was getting a degree in psychology, and I was also pre-med, so I did the million science classes and, oh my gosh, organic chemistry. And so I kind of thought that, although kind of towards the end I wasn't so sure, but I thought I'd finish up pre-med because I'd be kicking myself if I decided to apply to med school later and then had to go back and do the requirements. But at that point I wasn't thinking teacher. I had looked into Teach for America then, but after college everything was so uncertain. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't want to just move somewhere, and they give you some choice in where you teach, but it's not a for sure thing, so I didn't apply then. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Okay. I've been talking with all kinds of people all over the country, and when I say I'm doing a documentary about our current moment in America, almost everyone has a kind of powerful reaction to that. People have a real sense that this is a kind of unusual or even extraordinary moment, but there's no consensus at all about what's important about it or what it is that is so odd or interesting or whatever. So what does it mean to you when I say, our current moment in America? What are the important things, or what's the main thing that occurs to you about what's going on?
I guess I think of Obama being president and the change that has kind of brought with it, and just the sign of the change in ideology of the country that happened, and the economic mess that's become, and I guess also this impending or impeding threat that terrorists or something bad is going to happen. So kind of all three of those things, but then if I remove it from like the news and the big picture and I look at my own life, like it's pretty great.
So, well, let's tease this apart a little bit. First of all, okay, Obama, how involved were you in the election on either side of the question? How closely did you follow it? How much did you care about it? And how did you experience that whole period, say the 6 months leading up to the election, and then the election and the inauguration?
I guess it was just really exciting because I'm not a fan of Bush, and so any change was great. But then when Palin ended up being up with McCain, it really got me interested, because it's like, holy crap, she cannot be the vice president. She's crazy. And so watching her in the debates, I think it was actually, because I'd seen Obama speak and paid attention, but I think it was paying attention to her and McCain and how silly I thought they were during those debates that got me more interested. I didn't watch all of them, but I tried to follow pretty closely, and then went over to my grandpa's house for election night. He held a party with, of course, an Obama cutout welcoming us to his house, which was really fun. And then the excitement at my school, my principal and a bunch of teachers had been really interested, and they actually ended up flying out for the inauguration. But opening it up and putting it on a lot of the TVs, and the kids just super, super excited about it. And then inauguration, we weren't allowed to stream it into our rooms because something with the network, it kept getting choppy, but there was a lot of excitement around it, and I think that it was really cool and fun.
When you were a bit younger, let's say 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, did you think that you would ever see an African-American president in your lifetime? Like, how surprising was this whole thing to you?
Really surprising. I don't think that I ever, not ever would have thought it, but not so early on in my lifetime, I guess. Because, I mean, even if you just look back a short history, it wasn't that long ago that, Brown versus Board of Education and slaves and just incredible segregation, and then to come so far, I guess maybe I wouldn't have say never did I think it was going to happen, but just probably not so soon.
And then, through the period where first he wins the nomination, and then through the debate season, and then to the election itself, on election night, were you surprised that he won? I mean,
No, I wasn't surprised on election night. I think as it got closer and closer, I became more and more confident, especially seeing, because my fiance's parents live in Omaha, and seeing kind of even how that crowd in Nebraska was kind of running it, going towards Obama. It was pretty interesting, because even if you compared that to their election history in the past, it was Republican. And so seeing that change and the polls as it got closer and closer, it wasn't as surprising, but it was still hard to believe. It's like, wow, that really happened.
And what's been your sense of him through this first year of his presidency?
Oh my gosh, he has the worst job in the entire world. I can't imagine. He came into a huge, huge, huge mess, and I feel like even the first year or two, the only thing that we could really expect is damage control because of what he came into. Picking up the pieces and just trying to keep the country from growing even farther. And so, you know, he came in with his change and healthcare and all these different policies. And I guess I wouldn't say that I held high expectations right away because it's bureaucratic and it takes a while, but also other things were a priority. The market was crashing. He needed to pick up the pieces, rebuild the faith for the country, and really set himself up for success by showing the country that he can be successful. So he kind of had to lay that out before I feel like he can really do the dirty work, I guess. And, you know, really change the policies.
So are you still feeling patient with him?
Yes.
Okay.
Very patient.
And what's your sense of other people around you?
I feel like most people are pretty patient. I feel like lots of people realize just how big of a task he's up against, and I mean, just the unique situation that this country's never been in before, with the threat of terrorism, with healthcare, with the economic downfall, with people losing their homes, and he's pretty much just trying to play a balancing act and keep everything from getting worse than it already is. And so I think lots of people understand that. I know people want change fast, but then I also see how slowly things change in any bureaucracy. And so I guess I don't put my expectations too high. I try not to.
Okay, so let's tease out some of the other strands of this. You talked about the kind of post 9/11-ness of this time that we're living in. Can you talk about kind of how you think about that and what it means to you, but also how you experience it or don't in your kind of day-to-day life?
It's actually, the timing was crazy because it was my very first week of college. So I had just moved 2,000 miles away from home by myself, and I had one friend who had moved to Boston, but she was at a different college. And it was literally the first week of school that it happened, and pretty scary to be away from home for your first week and then to have all of that happen in Boston shut down. No one could come in and out. Trains stopped running, and it was really scary. And that was like first week of college, welcome. So it was kind of crazy.
How did the college or your college community, or wasn't even a community yet, but the people that you were with in this new setting in Boston, I mean, how was it handled?
I thought it was outrageous. The school didn't even cancel classes, and 35 or 40% of our school comes from New York State and mostly the city. So I was pretty appalled by that, but as far as the people who I just met, I think it probably made us stronger because we were sitting, I mean, when you're in the dorm room, I didn't have TV. We weren't watching regular news. Like, someone down the hall had TV and had regular news on, and so we'd all rush into their room and watch the news together. So I think it kind of created that community, but it also created a sense of total vulnerability. Like, not only are you away from home, but now our country is incredibly vulnerable, and I don't have my mom. Like, oh my gosh.
So what happens to that set of feelings over time? I mean, from day one to now, 10 years later, I mean, how would you describe the trajectory of your own kind of emotions and ideas about that aspect of the world?
I mean, I guess at first I was still kind of scared. Like, what if it happened again? But at this point, I feel like lots of people have been saying for now almost 10 years, I guess, 9 years, that something big is going to happen. Something big is going to happen. It's coming. And I feel like it's always in the news, but yet it hasn't happened. There have been close calls, but nothing's really happened. And so I guess I don't feel that impending, this is going to happen, it's going to happen. I mean, someday, yes, of course, something is going to happen. That's inevitable. But as far as this impending doom or this increased threat, I guess I don't feel it daily. Although I know that it's out there and that their entire task force is devoted to it. because maybe they've just been doing their job, I kind of feel like it's not that big of a threat,
Right.
and especially in my daily life in Colorado.
Right, I was going to ask about that. If you're not going through an airport, are
Yeah.
there any other visible signs anywhere in Boulder that were
No.
kind of in this era?
Not
Okay.
that I can see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, unless you're in an airport or unless you're watching news, it's not in my daily life, I would say.
And then the big piece of it that you mentioned at the outset was the economic downturn. So, you already said that your life is pretty great, but how have you experienced that, or how have you seen firsthand what other people are experiencing?
I guess I've mostly seen it through my fiance Greg, because he was in the financial industry or business and very, very interested, so always kind of updating me on the market even before any of this was happening and telling me his predictions and stuff like that. And so that'd kind of be my dose of economics. And so I guess I mostly saw it through him and the people that he worked with and the company downsizing and going, I think, from like 11 people, now it's down to 3. And then...
Do you have any sense of what those other people are doing now?
Yes. Some of them are not working, and some of them are working for other companies. And I think one of them is now a stay-at-home dad. So a couple things, but I know some of them are unemployed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I kind of saw it through that. What else? And I guess an extension of that, some members of Greg's family have lost their jobs through it. I don't have anyone other than connection through his family, like direct friends who've lost their jobs or anything right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I feel really safe being in education.
Right.
And at a school that I feel comfortable at, with a principal I feel comfortable at, I feel like I really have job security. Mm-hmm. Although, if I wasn't doing this, I don't know what I would do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to ask, though, I mean, has this affected the school system that you're in?
Yes.
And how do you see that?
As far as in our building, it's been fine for this year. I mean, they're always talking about the budget and how there's never enough money to buy teachers and stuff like that. But they're planning next year, they're cutting a bunch of people's jobs. The instructional specialists, people who come from outside the building, come in to help the teachers. And then they're considering cutting the within building teacher facilitators who kind of facilitate like math and science meetings or language arts and try and provide support that way. The district is thinking of cutting those. I think it's been worse in elementary schools, and
you're teaching which grade? 8?
I teach 6 and 7.
6 and 7, okay.
I think
which here? That's middle school now? Okay.
That's middle school. So 6th through 8th is middle school, and then 1st through 5th is elementary. I think elementary got hit pretty bad because they stopped funding a specific reading program that was providing extra funds to hire reading support teachers. And so I know that was a pretty big deal, although the district tried to recover some of those positions. Our paraprofessionals got cut for the middle school, so science, which is what I teach, never had para support last year, but I had one paraprofessional that came in during one period, and now there's not a single paraprofessional.
And what would that person do?
That person was with specific special needs students.
Oh, okay.
And so, for example, the other teacher who teaches 7th grade, she has 12 special ed students in one classroom, a full classroom of 26 or 30 without any support because the paraprofessionals have been cut.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess we've seen it that way at our school. But as far as, tangible things in the classroom, it's pretty much the same as last year.
Mm-hmm. Are you able to get a glimpse of the lives of the kids that you're working with in any way?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, can you just describe to me the school itself,
Yeah.
where it is, what kind of population you're working with?
So I teach at a school. Should I say the name?
Sure.
Okay.
Or unless if you don't want to, you don't have to. The name really isn't important. So.
Okay. Well, I teach at a school which is pretty unique in the district because there are only two 6 through 12 schools. So it's 6th grade through 12th grade. So it's pretty interesting because you have 11-year-olds running around with 18-year-olds in the same building. And the population, I don't have the specific demographics, but it's above 80% free and reduced lunch, and between, I'd say 55 to 60% Hispanic, and then the other 35 or 38% African American, and then we have a handful of Asian students and a handful of white students. And the school itself is in a pretty new community called Green Valley Ranch, which is new construction, very nice. There's not much out there. A grocery store. They built a Walmart. Fast food. It's a pretty new community, planned out, parks and stuff like that. And the houses around it are very nice. Most of my population gets bussed in from another neighborhood, which is not nearly as nice and has a higher rate of crime and a higher rate of poverty than where the actual school is. Although lots of the kids from the neighborhood do attend the school.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what are the glimpses of their lives that you get through your working with them?
I mean, I guess it's kind of tough, especially with young adolescents and teenagers, because they never really want you to know what's actually going on in their lives. Like, if you came into my classroom, I would say 90% of the kids have on some sort of brand name tennis shoes. They're wearing their brand new Nikes or Air Jordans or Vans or expensive shoes. But then you talk to the student and his mom works at McDonald's all night and gets off at 5 a.m. to get him ready to go to school and to take care of a baby. And so what you see in the classroom and what the kid is trying to put on to you is very different than what is actually going on at home. I guess there's been not a ton, but a lot of people moving. They're no longer staying in their apartment, and whether that's by choice or if it got too expensive, I'm not sure, because a lot of the kids, they just want to tell you how excited they are to go to another school or how sad they are to leave. They don't really want to tell you exactly why. But I guess it's kind of interesting because this population of students and their families is poor to begin with, so a huge crash of the market doesn't there's no money in the market. Like, I wouldn't know if the market crashed because I don't have any in the market unless I'm watching the news. But as far as job losses, I'm not sure with their parents. Most of them, when I interact with them or call them or try and set up parent-teacher conferences, they're still working, still doing whatever they were before. So I guess it's hard to say. I guess I don't see them as losing as much as the wealthier people in our country did.
It's like the first Great Depression. I mean, there was a story of it was right after the crash in 1929, and somebody remarked to his African American butler that, wow, everything's gotten horrible, and the butler just laughed and said, "It's been horrible. What are you talking about? It's been horrible for decades." Yeah. So there's that element. So can you talk to me a little bit about your experience now? I mean, because you really are, in so many ways, the kind of outsider coming in to teach in this school. What's that been like? And especially now that this is your second year, kind of, how have you kind of found your feet in that setting?
It's been really awesome. Last year was for sure the hardest time ever. It was just so overwhelming trying to just get my sense of self as a teacher in the classroom. But as far as coming into a community, it's been awesome. The students are very, very welcoming, and our school previously, before it had the administration that it has now, had a huge teacher turnover rate. Like, 14 people would be absent out of the building a day. People would be quitting just at the semester. They just would never show up again. And so just a sense of consistency in showing up in my classroom every day, I think automatically built trust with some of my students that yes, I'm going to be here every single day, whether you like it or not. That's why I'm here. So I think that also helped. And also just trying to really bond with my students and explaining to them that I see them as people. Like, it's not just the work that you do in my classroom, but you're this great, awesome person. And as far as the staff community, I felt really, really welcomed. We had a really young staff. Our school, I think it was like 50% of the teachers left the year before I came there. So we had 50% new staff. A lot of them were first-year teachers. And so I felt really supported with them. And our staff itself is pretty diverse. And I think it's one of the only schools in DPS that has such diversity on the administration and within the teachers. We have 2 black principals, a Hispanic principal, and a white, or I guess assistant principal, and a white assistant principal, which in and of itself is very diverse. But we also have our deans we have one who's black and one who's Hispanic, and so I think it really helps build that community with our students too, to see that they're just like all the people in positions of power in our school, as well as some of the teachers, but then their staff is diverse. We have, young teachers to veteran teachers, so I think it kind of helps build that sense of community, although there's definitely a line between some of the parents and feeling safe coming into the school, especially with our Hispanic population. I think lots of the parents, because they may be here illegally, think that if they come into school, they're going to get in trouble. And so trying to create family events for parents to come in is kind of hard, although we've been successful some of the time. But creating that sense of, no, we're not out to get you, we're not turning you in, we don't care, we just want you to come here with your student and support them. And on that line, a lot of our students and parents, they don't want to report how much money they make when they turn in their forms for free and reduced lunch. So we'll have students who are eligible, but they were embarrassed to turn in the paperwork, or the parents were scared to turn in the paperwork saying that they didn't make enough money to pay for lunch. And so that actually ends up hurting our school, because then we get funds cut from them not filling it out. But so I guess there's that divide between the community and the school, in that they don't necessarily know how welcoming it is and that we just want to help you. Our school's created parent classes by our family liaison in their English classes for the parents to come in and learn conversational English. And that kind of helps for the parents who sign up for it, but trying to get that communication is kind of hard.
I want to ask what you've learned personally about how to meet those challenges, or maybe even what you've learned about yourself in meeting those kinds of challenges. But first, I want to know, has this experience led you to either think about or even understand your own whiteness in a different way than you ever had? Like, because clearly you probably have to reckon with it in a way that you never had, growing up in Boulder. So what was that? What has that been like?
It's really interesting. Part of Teach for America's program is you read about white privilege before you even go to institute the summer training and even start teaching. And so it just kind of gets you thinking, because I've always known that I've been very privileged to grow up where I do and to have such a great family and a support system and to be supported and encouraged in all of the things that I do. But then it really makes you flip-flop to the people to think about how they're constantly discouraged in everything that they do and have been for their entire lives. And so it's really weird. It really makes you think about it. And then it makes you think about how other people judge you. And especially being from Boulder, there are so many stereotypes. As soon as you tell people you're from Boulder, they just make tons of assumptions. Oh, you're totally loaded. Everyone's white. It's great. Everyone's hippies. Right on. And then it just kind of, they've already made that stereotype. And so it kind of makes you think about, how are my students looking at me? How is this community looking at me? Like, oh, great, you're young. You're with Teach for America. Great. Like, are you only here for your 2 years? Are you really here for our kids? What's your motive, kind of?
Mm-hmm.
And so it really makes me think about that.
I'm guessing that it's easier to win the kids' trust in some ways than it is to win the parents. Is that true?
Parents, I've only had one negative experience with a parent. Parents, as long as you can genuinely convey that you care about their child and you see just how great they are, they've been very, very receptive. Although sometimes the students, if they're grumpy or angry at you or they get a detention, their backlash will be, it's because you're racist.
Mm-hmm.
You're racist. It's because I'm Mexican, that's why you gave me detention. No, it's because your behavior was totally unacceptable, and everyone who does that gets a detention. And so it's kind of like an insult that they can throw at me that they can't throw at some of the other teachers of color.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, part of it is, how do you react to that? Do you sit there and try to explain to a 12-year-old, well, no, I'm not racist. This is really because you just need detention. But it's like, it's something that they can throw at me that at that time I can't reason with them, which, sometimes you can't reason with 12-year-olds, so.
Right. Don't I know?
Yeah. You know all about that.
So in the Teach for America, the way the program is set up, how much contact do you actually have with other people who are in your position?
So the first year, a lot. I would have, there are 4 Teach for America teachers within my building, and there's 1 alumni Teach for America teacher in my building. And so that was pretty regularly. I would see them. One girl last year, it was her second year and it was my first year, and she kind of took me under her wing. She'd check in on me and give me hints and stuff like that. But as far as like organized time through Teach for America, it would be at least twice a month, usually 3 times a month for a couple hours. And those were like scheduled training sessions. And then I would have one-on-one observations and then debriefs with my program director, who was my direct supporter. And then this second year, since I'm enrolled in the master's program, it exempts me from most Teach for America obligations, which is kind of nice because I found that although the support last year was really good, I think that the master's program is better for second year teachers. I don't know if I could. I feel like it might be redundant to be doing the same things.
Do you know roughly what the percentages are of Teach for America teachers who stay on?
I think it's like 40% for their they stay on for a third year, and then it drops from there. Mm-hmm. But I'm not positive. Right now there are 39 of our, I want to say 78 core members in my year who are in the master's program, which is Master's in Education. And so if they're not going to stay in the program, almost all 39 of them are planning on staying in education in some form. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty high percentage for Denver.
Let's bring some of these themes together. You talked a little bit at the outset about your school on Inauguration Day. Did you get a sense of what it meant to the students?
Yes and no. When you're 11, I don't think you see just how big the picture is. But I think they were able to see it through their parents and the rest of the community's excitement of just how cool it was. I don't know if that was really coming from them or their parents and our principals just totally amazed. And like our principal came over the loudspeaker the day he won the election and just gave this speech. Like, now it has been proven we really can do anything. Like, we have a black president. We can do everything. It's been proven to us. Now we just need to do it for ourselves, kind of a thing. And so it gave them that tangible role model within their lifetime. But as far as...
Do you think that registers for them? Or...
Yes and no. Like I said, when you're 11, I don't think you're comprehending just how big events are. And I mean, I tried to talk to some of my students about 9/11, and they know about it, but they were in preschool, and so even that doesn't ring a bell. It's just, it's not in their lifetime, really. And so there was so much excitement. That's all that we talked about that day. Everyone wearing Obama shirts, just very, very exciting. But I don't know if they really, I don't know.
What's your outlook for your students? Are you basically optimistic about where we are and kind of the outlook from here? Or how do you think about their future?
I am optimistic. I think that No Child Left Behind is leaving the entire country behind. Because we are constantly testing our students and our schools are constantly being told that we are not adequate. Our teachers are being told that we are not adequate, we're not good enough, we're not getting the job done. And we're constantly being measured and never told that it's good enough. That unless that changes, I don't know how much better it can get for our students until we start looking at them as valuable and that you are adequate. And this crappy test that you spend, I think we spend testing, 18 days of a year, the students are doing some sort of test. And when you think that the student's calendar year is only 176 days, of course they're not catching up because you're taking so much of their time to test them and tell them that they're not good enough. And the labels aren't used to say, good job, you're proficient. It's you're deficit. Unsatisfactory. Right. You're no good.
And are you under pressure to teach to the tests then? Because
I'm in a unique position because science in Colorado, it's not important. It's only tested in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade.
Why is that?
Because they don't think it's important.
Wow.
Because it's math. Because we're scored from No Child Left Behind on our math, reading, and writing scores.
Oh, I see.
So the state tests science, but it doesn't matter if we do great.
So in an ironic way, I mean, you're kind of off the hook because of the pressure that other people are under, right?
Mm-hmm, totally.
And that's that's a statewide thing. Or is that handled? That's the state.
That's the CSAP states, the Colorado state tests. So they only test it 3rd, 5th, 8th, and 10th. And so when they take the test in 8th grade, they're expected to remember all of the content from 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then the scores don't really matter. They're never used for anything. It takes them 6 months to grade them, literally. And but as far as language arts and math teachers, in some schools, I wouldn't say my school, their job depends on it.
Right.
And so...
How is that even discussed? Is it discussed that openly, that you have to teach to the test because that's the only measure?
Not at my school, but when one of my master's classes, we were talking about it and the immense pressure. And then when you do a great job, it's never good enough. Like, especially charter schools, literally their jobs and their salaries depend on it. Like, if you increase your CSAP scores, you get huge bonuses, and if you don't, likely you're fired, and you don't make any money. And so it's constantly on those teachers' minds every single day. Like, not only is this my livelihood and my mortgage, this is my job. And so it really takes away from experiential learning. Like, our school has gone into this intervention model. So if you're unsatisfactory in math or writing or reading, you get put into an intervention class, which is another hour, 83 minutes of it. And so we're taking these kids who already think that they're bad at these things, and then we're making them do them twice as much as the students who are good at them. And I don't want to do something I'm bad at every single day, twice as much as someone who's good at it. Like, that's not going to make me any better at it. But it's this pressure. Like, if our school doesn't show growth, we're threatened because we've been in redesign by the state, and this was a 5-year plan, that if we don't show growth, we can get shut down. And so it's on everybody's mind. We need to increase their scores, and so they're constantly buying new curriculums, the district is, and like, all right, this is going to teach them how to read, but reading hasn't changed.
Right.
And so buying
Is there a camaraderie among teachers on these issues, or is it divisive? How does that work out?
I mean, we meet mostly as a science department, and so we're not constantly talking about the testing, but as far as math and language arts, I think it's always on their mind. Like, I'm in the hallway the other day, we get back from winter break. We have 18 instructional days left with our students until CSAP. How are we going to prepare them? We need to start shoving CSAP down. And it starts from day one. Like, we need to start deconstructing a prompt and all of this stuff that, honestly, I probably can't do the 7th grade language arts, but I made it through college just fine. And so it's silly. And also, what Colorado and DPS do is they buy national curriculums that are usually aligned to New York, Texas, or California state standards, but then the students are tested on Colorado standards because we're not rich enough to get McGraw-Hill to write us a curriculum for our standards. And so kids are taught one thing
And tested on
and
another.
tested on a complete another. Like, the 7th grade science curriculum does not align with the state standards that they're tested on pretty much at all. And like, the 6th grade curriculum, DPS didn't want to buy the book on fossils, although if you look historically at the CSAP, 6 of the 50 points have been on fossils for the last 5 consecutive years. But we didn't buy that book. But we don't know why our kids aren't passing the CSAPs, because we're not teaching it. And it's just this huge disconnect. And then there are teachers who teach just the curriculum, whereas my training is you start with the state standards and then you try and work with your curriculum to cover all of them. And so some teachers, if they're straight out of school, especially if they didn't get their degree in education in Colorado, they have no idea that these two things aren't aligned. And so they would have to be going out on their own researching it to figure it out, but there's never like a training with DPS. Like, you go to 1-day training, it's like, here's HR, here's the number you call, this is your email address. But it's never like in-depth training.
If you were going to set about to reform the system, where would you start? I mean, how conceptually, how is the way of thinking? I mean, you have a kind of model in your head of what ought to be going on in the classroom, and then this sense of the existing bureaucracy and all that's absurd about it. But where's the point of entry if you're starting to break in and kind of crack it open and make some meaningful changes?
I think it's in the structure of the school day. I think it's that, okay, math is from 7:25 to 8:48, and then you only have 3 minutes to get to a class, and if you're tardy, like, God forbid you're the worst student in the world, but we'll let you in. Okay, now you're going to learn language arts. And then at 10:14, language arts stops, and then you're going to go learn about social studies. And just implicitly, it's teaching the students that there aren't connections. Like, math needs to stop at 8:48, and you need to start language arts at 8:51. And if you are late, end of the world.
Right.
Like, check mark, you're bad. And I don't think I mean, that's not how any of us think. I don't, like, pick up a book and then, oh my gosh, I can't read that anymore. It's not time for language arts. I need to go look at my bank statements. And so it's just so compartmentalized that our kids aren't given the opportunity to make those connections between what they're learning.
Right. And they're given plenty of opportunity to conclude that these things aren't important.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, a lot of what I try to do, and if I had the perfect classroom and instruction, it would be entirely project-based. It would be, this has a purpose. This is why it has a purpose. Like, you're going to present this to the community, so you are responsible for informing them. You need to do this research. It's going to be something you're interested in. While you're doing all of that, you're making sure your language arts skills are good because you don't want to be embarrassed when you're presenting it. So you're going to double check your spelling. You're going to want to do your best. You're going to want to make sure your calculations are correct because you don't want to give misinformation. You want to get your background history correct. And so I think it needs to be more community and project based rather than here's some really totally meaningless sentences, find the verb.
Mm-hmm.
Or here's some totally meaningless math work. You need to do 10 worksheets of it and it needs to be turned in tomorrow or else you're awful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like that sign that we send to our students, and especially, I mean, of course students need to learn responsibility and being places on time and punctuality and responsibility. But I don't think there's anyone in their real daily life that if they're 10 seconds late, you're yelled at or penalized or in trouble or it's a check mark against you.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like you have a bell. It's like, I mean, I don't know how else you do it and you get students to places on time logistically, but it's just
But
like,
the rigidity
like,
is,
oh my goodness. Like,
yeah.
I mean, we all survived it, but it's still just, I mean, even growing up, here, I was talking to our social studies teacher about it. Like, we had Geoglish, which was geography and English, and it was a double-sized class, so there were probably 50 or 60 students in a double room with 2 teachers, and it was twice as long, but it made everything just fit together. We would be writing about the history we were just learning,
right.
or we would be measuring our skills on a map that we were then going to apply to some part of history. And now it's like, oh, here's our curriculum. This is chapter 18. So today you're going to learn about the Civil War, and then it's done.
Right.
And that's it.
Over.
It's so... But I mean, I think it takes really, really good teachers. I don't know how to do project-based learning. I try to incorporate it, but I think it takes a really skilled teacher and experience to make it meaningful for all the students.
Mm-hmm. What's been your very favorite moment as a teacher?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. My very favorite moment. I don't know if there's just like one moment, but very rarely when I have all students engaged on something that I'm telling them to me, which is just like not that, or it's not that it's not interesting, but it's just something that I've known for a long time, or just makes total sense to me, or like, and that they're all just kind of looking at me like, oh my gosh, this is so brand new, interesting, and it doesn't happen that often when you have all 28 eyes on you and you're telling them one thing that you don't even think is that interesting, but they're looking at you and you're like, oh, I guess I am a teacher. I don't usually feel like one, but I get, and it's, so that part is pretty fun. But I guess just my students, and also seeing my students from last year, so like the 8th graders this year, the ones who stop by and say hi, and the ones who, oh my goodness, in the classroom drove me nuts, and we butted heads, and they probably made me go crazy. And then this year they're stopping by. I miss your class. How are you? Can I be back in 7? And so it's like, although if you had asked me last year if I had any effect or if they even remembered a single thing from my class, I would have said no.
Right.
But then seeing them again, really,
That's great.
it's great. They're awesome. They're really cool.
I have one more kind of big historical question. This gets back to, you mentioned a while back that some of your kids are likely from families that are undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, I guess, first of all, how much do you actually know about that?
I don't know that much. We know more about our high school students because as they're starting to apply for college and stuff like that, they're more open with the high school teachers. Like, I'm afraid to apply for financial aid because my parents are undocumented. But as far as my middle school students, I don't know that much. I know, and this is very stereotypical, but lots of my students' parents are house cleaners and work in construction. And I don't know as far as whether it's legally or illegally. They don't really go into it. So I'm not sure about it.
The other question is, how much do you know about the politics of immigration in Colorado right now? Is that like a real hot button issue in this state, the way it is in the states along the border? Is it as rancorous an issue here as it has been elsewhere?
Not that I can tell. I think that I know last year, and I can't even really remember or get it right. There was a bill that got passed about students who went to high school in Colorado were eligible for in-state tuition, whether they were documented as living here or wherever their parents were from, and that was a really big jump and was really exciting. But as far as like my everyday life and stuff like that, I don't think it's a huge issue. I know just in passing, one of my students, his extended family is from Mexico, and so he was having lunch in my classroom and I was talking to him. And I was like, oh, cool. Do you think you'll ever visit your family down in Mexico? And he said, no, I'm afraid to cross the border. And I said, why? Just, in light conversation. He's like, I don't know. I'm just really scared. I don't ever want to cross the border. And I'm sure that's been instilled from his parents. They're here. They want to stay here. And it's gotten passed on down to him as he mentioned that he was scared of the guards. And so he's seen it more as a physical thing. Like, these guards are physically intimidating, whereas I'm sure his parents are feeling we're not going to be able to get back in. But I can't really tell.
Okay. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel like we should have?
Let's think. I guess one part of my school that's really cool, we have a really small high school class, and this will be our first senior class. And so each of our teachers has been assigned one student in the senior class to kind of mentor. And I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the school because my student is just amazing. And she'll be the first person in her family to graduate from high school, and she's already been accepted into 2 colleges, and we've been applying for scholarships and grants and stuff like that together. And I guess it makes it really a lot more tangible because in 6th grade, we're talking about college. You guys are the class of 2015, right on, and it's like so far off. But then to get to interact with a student where she really will be the first one to graduate from high school.
Yeah.
She's going to college, and what that must mean to her family. Because in their eyes, she really is living the American dream. And so I guess that's really, really touching. And her sense of leadership is amazing. She's just awesome. And so getting to know her and being able to relate to her more on that like exciting turning point in her life, which I don't feel like I get to do with middle school students.
Right. So the American dream, is that a phrase that in general to you still holds meaning? or has it been emptied out, or what's the deal on that one?
Oh my gosh. Probably. I think it's something lots of people look for, but what it actually is, I think, means different things to everyone. I think to some people, it means just surviving and living and feeding their families. I think to others, it means Fortune 500 CEO, you have all the money in the world. And so I don't think there really is a specific American dream. And I guess I say that because I know this student's, her mom is from, I want to say Honduras, and moved here, and Spanish is her first language, so her parents are immigrants. And we haven't had too many conversations about her family heritage, but she's given the sense that they moved here to get away from poverty in that sense. And so I can only imagine the joy and how proud her parents are to see her where she is now.
What's your version of the American dream?
For me personally, or what I think?
Yeah.
For me
or
personally?
if the phrase has any meaning
to me,
to you, what is that meaning?
Oh my gosh. I guess having the freedom to do the things that you want and to pursue the dreams that you have. So if you want to be a musician or you want to be a teacher, that you have that opportunity. Or if you want to travel, you have those options. They may not be attainable because of societal structures. They may not happen for a million different reasons, but being able to even know that there's
They're they're on the table.
Yeah, we're not in North Korea where we're trapped in our country starving to death. And so I think that it just kind of stands for opportunity. Whether they're tangible or people can achieve them, I don't know. I think that sometimes it gets cloudy. I guess there's a sense that there's a lot more opportunity than I think that there is. I think that society is still holding a lot of people back. And then, in general, society wants to say it's them that are holding them back.
Right. What, I keep thinking of more and more questions, but you're 26?
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest change you've seen in your lifetime?
The biggest change I've seen in my lifetime? Gosh.
The size of self.
I don't know. I guess maybe just growth. Like physical growth of towns, of places, of excess. And I mean, I guess that happens in anybody's lifetime. So I don't know if it's specific to my time.
That could still be the biggest change, though.
Because, I mean, even, I'm sure, yeah, you've seen it just driving around Boulder. Like, there's not a single empty lot anywhere. And so that's, like, something that you see all the time. And you're like, wait, that used to be a huge empty field, and now it's all apartments. And so just the idea, or I guess the sense that everything is growing and getting bigger. But I don't know other changes. I'm trying to think. I don't know. That's a good one.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'll turn this off.
The thing's so cool. 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 The thing's so cool.